I understand the next call is a split call. The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr Speaker, I want to make a few points. I'll first of all just respond to the member who sat down. I actually agree that some of the changes that National are making are useful. I think the $359 million is a step in the right direction, but one's got to remember it is well under 1% of the salary budget. It is minuscule and actually won't make the changes that are wanted. Mr Speaker, we will vote against this bill. The main reason that I'm voting against this bill is as a result of the changes that are made around tertiary education governance. Because I think that if there had been two bills and the bill only addressed the question of the Education Council of New Zealand, then it could well be amendable and supportable. Mr Speaker, I think it is fair to say, as a former Minister of Education, that probably my biggest area of policy failure was the setting up in the initial stages of the Teachers' Council. It was something where the initial appointment was wrong. Cathy Irwin was not a suitable person to appoint to chair that organisation. I took advice on the matter and I had doubts. The advice came from Liz Gordon, and I regret that I took her advice as to Cathy's suitability, because my view was that the Teachers' Council probably suffered for a period of about 5 years as a result of the poor governance at the beginning of the process and the poor setting up there. I do want to acknowledge the work that Stan Roger did in tidying up some of it, but more recently Cathy Smith and Alison McAlpine as chairs of the organisation have done a very good job, and I also want to acknowledge the current Chief Executive, who I think has done an excellent job and has almost certainly been the best. And having criticised Cathy Irwin, I have to say that my old mate Harvey McQueen didn't have the ability to do detailed work necessary and to set systems up necessary, and in fact, I think even as recollections of the time of the Longi government, I think they were a relatively poor history. He was a poet. He had imagination. And he had imagination in his writings, and I think it's fair to say that he did not have the necessary focus to be the chief executive of an organisation like this, and that's sad. And I think as a result of that, it did suffer, and the vision that I had for it, and that was that it would in fact be the organisation that was the main deliverer of professional learning for teachers in New Zealand, that it would contract with the ministry, and it would be the organisation that would be of teachers, by teachers, for teachers, and developing the profession is something that is now we've lost by a period probably of about 15 years, and that's something that I very much regret.
No, 2 minutes, sorry. I rang the bell at the wrong time.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. So it's my colleagues will tell other members of the House it's not that often you get mea culpas from me, but in this particular area, I think we did lose something. And my view is also, if we had managed to make the transfer of the funding of professional learning to the Teachers' Council, it would not have been as easy for Anne Tolley to take that $100 million out in the way that she did on an annual basis in the first of those budgets. And my view is that that sort of cut, if it was into an organisation that was owned by teachers and contracted to teachers, would have resulted in much louder screams than actually occurred, because the screams in 2009 were mainly political things. They were not extensive screams, because my view is that most parents did not realise that the National Party were cutting the future quality of the education of young people in New Zealand by taking out the funding for the most important thing, because the quality of learning in a classroom is much very much based on the quality of teaching, and the quality of teaching depends on the professional development and the professional support of those teachers. The National Party cut that to ribbons in their first term. I think our kids will suffer for decades to come as a result of those cuts. Mr. Speaker, I am opposed to this bill, but I regret that the Minister didn't put up the important part of it separately.
Order. The member's time has expired. I call Holly Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, my colleague Catherine Delahunt has already spoken at length